The poor girl hid under a table to escape her abusive husband and found a mafia boss instead. I ran. I didn't look back. My heels clattered across marble, echoing louder than the pulse in my throat, until one snapped and sent me crashing against a column. The sting of skin against stone meant nothing. Pain was familiar. Pain had a name. Henrique. "Isidora!" he barked from somewhere behind, voice dripping with venom dressed as silk. "Don't make a scene." I shoved the heel off my foot, then the other, breath slicing through my lungs. People dined and drank and smiled, blind to the woman bleeding from the soul, running barefoot through elegance. The hallway opened into another corridor, darker, quieter. My fingers brushed doors, searching for one unlocked, for anything, until one gave way. I pushed it open, slipped in, and closed it gently, praying he hadn't seen. Voices, deep, male, sharp, not Henrique's. I froze. The room was warm with cigar smoke and power. A long table stretched before me, cloaked in white linen, wine glasses catching the light like threats. My legs folded, my body lowered, and I hid. Under the table, the carpet was thick and expensive, but it scratched against my knees as I curled into myself, silent. Every breath I took felt deafening. My pulse roared in my ears. My lips trembled as I pressed a hand over them. Just 5 minutes. Let him leave. Let me vanish. A pair of shoes stopped inches from my face. Italian leather, gleaming. I didn't dare move. My vision blurred, lashes soaked. The men continued speaking above, numbers, deliveries, territories. But this pair of shoes, they didn't move. They had noticed. Slowly, I looked up. He sat at the head of the table, shadowed in the low amber light. A man built from stillness, from silence, with eyes that burned beneath the calm like gunpowder before the spark. His gaze dropped to mine, and time fractured. I waited for the alarm, the call, the punishment. Instead, he lifted a single finger to his lips. Silence. I didn't blink. Then, he spoke. Not to me, but to the others. "We're done here." Chairs scraped, footsteps retreated, doors opened, closed. One by one, the voices vanished, until it was only the two of us, and the echo of my broken breathing. He stood slowly, walked around the table, his presence a storm in velvet. Then he crouched beside me, gaze still locked onto mine, like he could read every secret I ever buried under bruises and broken apologies. "What's your name?" His voice wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel either. It was precise, clean, like a knife before it cuts. "Isidora," I whispered, and hated how I sounded. Like a child, like prey. "Isidora," he repeated, and it sounded like a judgment. "Who are you running from?" I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but no sound came. Shame is a gag made of memory. His jaw flexed. He looked at my wrist, where the bruise peeked from my sleeve. He didn't ask permission. He reached out, took my hand, not gently, not harshly, and turned it over, exposing the full damage. "Tell me who did this," he said, voice like steel behind glass. "My husband." A beat of silence. Then two. "What's his name?" I hesitated. "Henrique Vasconcelos." Something shifted, not in his face but in the air around him. The name meant something to him. I saw it in the pause of his breath. "And what exactly were you planning to do after hiding under my table, Isidora?" "I didn't plan. I just ran." My throat tightened. I was going to die tonight. His fingers curled tighter around my wrist for half a second, then released. He stood. "Get up." I hesitated. He didn't repeat himself, just watched me. I rose on unsteady legs. My dress was torn at the hem. My hair clung to my face. I looked like ruin. "You will come with me now," he said. "Why?" I asked, too tired to beg, too numb to hope. "Because I don't allow men like Henrique to touch what they don't deserve." I didn't understand. I followed anyway. When we stepped into the hallway, 2 men in dark suits waited. He nodded once. "Take her safely. No questions." They obeyed without a word. I walked between them, barefoot and silent, my pulse thudding louder than their steps. Before the door closed behind me, I turned. He was still there, still watching. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just said one thing. "Breathe, Isidora. Tonight, no one touches you." And the door shut. The car outside smelled like leather and power. My hands trembled. My chest ached. But for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about surviving. I was thinking about him.
She was a mess of blood, silk, and silence. I watched her walk barefoot to the car, shoulders trembling under the weight of her own breath. She didn't look back, but I knew she could feel me. Some people beg to be seen. Others carry their suffering like a second skin, visible only to those who know what pain smells like. And I do. I always have. Her name still lingered on my tongue. Isidora. Sweet, heavy, familiar in a way that unsettled me. Enrique Vasconcelos. Now that was a name I recognized. A man who shook hands with devils in suits and wiped the blood with a Bible. A man too small to be feared, too protected to be touched. Until tonight, until she crawled into my world, trembling and ruined, and mine. I wasn't supposed to care, I didn't care, but something about her, God, something about her felt dangerous in a way I couldn't name. Not to me, to her, because this world, my world, chews on delicate things like her and spits out bones. When the door shut, I poured another drink. The crystal clinked. The burn was clean. I stared at the spot under the table where she had hidden like a hunted thing, and I remembered the way her eyes clung to mine, begging without voice. Most people break in silence. She had already been broken. What I saw was a woman trying to find the pieces. "Luca!" I called without raising my voice. He appeared like smoke, my right hand, loyal, brutal. "She'll be safe," he said before I asked. "Good. And him?" "Not yet." Luca hesitated. "You don't want to teach him a lesson?" I downed the rest of the whiskey, slow. "I want him to believe he still owns her. He didn't understand, not fully. That's fine. He didn't need to." I walked back to the table, fingers grazing the linen where she had pressed her palms. Her scent still lingered, expensive perfume, fear, desperation, but beneath it, defiance. It pulsed under her skin like a second heartbeat. She had looked at me like a cornered thing that had grown teeth. If I hadn't sent the men away, if I had left her there for one more minute, she might have burst into flames. I didn't bring her to my home out of mercy. I brought her because I needed to see what a woman does when everything is taken from her, when her last breath becomes a choice. I'd seen killers become lovers and lovers become corpses, but this was different. I opened the folder Luca had left on the table. Henrique's profile stared back at me like a smug ghost. Corruption, blackmail, domestic whispers that never turned into screams loud enough for the law to hear. Classic, cowardly, predictable. Except now, he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated the woman, and I'd seen her. That was enough to change everything. My phone buzzed once. A message. "She's resting. No incident." I replied, "No visitors, not even staff." I leaned back, fingers drumming the wood. The game had shifted, and no one knew it yet. She was a pawn no longer content with the board, and I wasn't sure what I was. Protector? Predator? Both? What disturbed me most wasn't the bruise on her wrist or the crack in her voice. It was the way she hadn't begged. She'd whispered. She'd trembled. But there was something buried in her silence that reminded me of steel. I'd seen fear dress itself as obedience before. But Isidora? She wore hers like beautiful, shattered, sharp. And I'd be a liar if I said I wasn't drawn to it. Not in the way men desire what they can't have. No, this was worse. This was fascination with the edge of a blade pressed to your own throat just to see if it will cut. There would be blood. And if I wasn't careful, it might be mine.
The sheets were cold when I woke. Too smooth. Too clean. They didn't smell like home. Thank God. There was no trace of him here. No scent of cologne masking decay. No footsteps pacing outside the door. No locks clicking behind me. Just silence. Heavy. Watchful. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I sat up slowly. Every muscle ached in strange ways, not from pain, but from release. Like my body didn't know how to exist without flinching. A room stretched around me, wide, elegant, and wrong. High ceilings, pale light filtering through curtains, the distant hum of nothingness. It wasn't comfort. It was a question. Why am I still alive? I slid my feet onto the cold floor and winced at the bruises blooming like secrets across my skin. My reflection stared back from the tall mirror across the room. Disheveled hair, a split lip, eyes like glass drowning in their own storm. But there was something else, too. The absence of him. It clung to me like a second skin. The door creaked. I turned fast, heart pounding, ready to defend, to run, to beg. But it wasn't him. It was no one. A tray of untouched food rested by the wall. Silver, spotless. Eggs, coffee, fruit. The kind of meal served to people with choices. The kind of morning I was never allowed to have. I didn't touch it. I wandered instead, slowly, barefoot, fingers tracing the edge of polished furniture, velvet curtains, locked drawers. This wasn't a room. It was a holding cell dressed in wealth, but not prison. Not yet. No bars, just invisible lines drawn in silence. And somewhere behind one of those walls, he was watching. I could feel it. I found the window. Outside, a garden. Perfect, trimmed, controlled. No neighbors, no city noise. Just a tall stone wall that whispered, "No one gets in or out." I whispered to the glass, "Where am I?" "You're safe." His voice was behind me, low, Precise. I turned slowly. He leaned in the doorway, dark suit, no tie. The kind of man who never needed to raise his voice to own the room. Eyes like winter storms. Still, brutal, endlessly deep. I don't feel safe, I said, barely above breath. That's because you're used to danger wearing a smile. I swallowed hard. What do you want from me? His head tilted slightly, like I'd asked the wrong question. Nothing. You came into my world. I only gave you a place to land. I didn't mean to. I whispered. I know. I didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't kind. He wasn't cruel. He didn't flirt. He didn't leer. He just watched me like I was a riddle written in scars and silence. And I hated how much I wanted him to read me. You could have sent me away. I don't return prey to hunters. That did something to me. Something dangerous. My knees nearly gave under it, not from fear, but from the weight of being believed, for once. I'm not prey, I said. And I meant it, even if my voice still shook. He stepped into the room, slow, measured, not a threat, not quite, but everything in me tensed anyway. No, he said, voice lower now. You're something else entirely. You just haven't remembered yet. I felt it then, the line we were both towing. Not physical, not yet, but thick in the air. Every breath dragged between us like silk across skin. I looked away before it swallowed me. I can't stay here. You can, for now. And after, when you stop shaking, we'll talk. I met his eyes again. I don't need your protection. He didn't move, but the room darkened with his reply. Then why are you still here? I didn't have an answer. Not one I could say out loud. So I looked at the food I hadn't touched and asked, is it poisoned? He smirked. Just barely. If I wanted you dead, Isidora, I wouldn't waste eggs. I almost laughed. Almost. He turned, then paused in the doorway. Eat. Walk. Sleep. Break something if you need to. You're not here to be quiet. Then he was gone. And I was left standing barefoot in a borrowed cage, with the ghost of a smirk burning in my chest, and a hunger I didn't understand tightening in my throat.
She didn't eat the eggs. Not a single bite. The tray came back untouched, and I couldn't decide if it irritated me or impressed me. Most people starve for a glimpse of comfort. She starved on purpose, like denying nourishment gave her back some fragment of control, and maybe it did. I watched her through the security, silent, barefoot, pacing that room like it was a cage she intended to burn down from the inside. Her fingers trailed over walls, shelves, anything that might hide a secret. But she wasn't searching. She was reclaiming space, and I let her. She didn't cry again. That was what stayed with me. Not once. Not when she saw her bruises in the mirror. Not when she touched the scar on her lip. Not when she stood at the window and whispered to the glass like it could answer her. She didn't know the glass was soundproof, but I heard her anyway. I stepped into the gym without speaking. The lights flickered on with my presence, clinical white over concrete and steel. The air was colder here, honest. No velvet, no charm, just iron and sweat and the sound of your own body giving out. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then the door opened. She stood in the threshold, arms folded, chin up like a dare. She'd changed clothes. Black tank top, loose pants, hair pulled back, still barefoot, still wild-eyed, still breathtaking. You said to break something, she murmured. I nodded once, tossing a towel aside. Break yourself first. Her laugh was quiet, dry. Already done. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I stepped closer, slowly, letting the tension stretch between us like a wire. Good. Then you know the cost. She looked past me, to the gloves, the mats, the weapons mounted like art, then back at me. What exactly are you offering, Dante? Freedom. But it doesn't come in silence, or surrender. And what do you get? I let the question sit there, heavy, almost obscene in its intimacy. I get to see what you become. She swallowed, throat shifting. What if I fail? Then you die. And I clean the floor. The corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smirk. Almost rage. Fair. I walked to the center of the mat and turned. Come. She hesitated. One step. Another. Then she was in front of me, heart pounding like I could hear it through her ribs. Hit me. She blinked. I didn't repeat it. Her first swing was clumsy. Too slow. Too soft. I caught her wrist midair, held it for a second longer than I should have. The contact made her flinch. Not from fear, from memory. Again! She struck harder. I blocked. Again. Again. Every failed punch stoked something raw in her. Her breath quickened, face flushed, anger finally starting to surface. You're holding back, I murmured. I'm not. Yes, you are. You're still trying to survive. That won't be She growled. Yes. Actually growled, and swung wild. I dodged. Her balance faltered. She stumbled forward and I caught her, arms around her waist, her chest crushed to mine in the space of a heartbeat. She didn't pull away. She looked up, lips parted, breath hot on my throat. The air changed, slowed, thickened. Her fingers clenched in my shirt before she realized it. I didn't move, neither did she. Then, very softly, she asked, "Have you ever been owned?" My answer was silence. Brutal, true. She pulled back, breath shivering, but something had shifted. Something dangerous and electric and real. "Again," she said, and this time she didn't miss.
My knuckles ached, skin split, blood bloomed in tiny crescents where my nails dug into my palm. But I didn't stop, not even when my breath caught or my balance slipped or the burn spread like fire up my arms. He didn't let me. Dante watched with that same impossible stillness, as if every movement I made was part of some unspoken test, and failure wasn't an option but a sentence. I was failing beautifully, and still, I craved his eyes on me. Every time he said again, I obeyed. Not because he commanded it, because something in me needed to keep breaking, to find what was buried beneath the girl who used to flinch when a man raised his voice. My body was screaming, but I'd never felt more alive. He finally stepped forward, took my wrist mid-punch, twisted, turned, and suddenly I was beneath him, spine flat against the mat, chest heaving, limbs pinned with terrifying ease. His body was all tension, barely touching mine, but I could feel the power in every place we didn't connect. The proximity set something wild loose in my blood. "Your balance is shit," he murmured, breath brushing the shell of my ear. "So teach me," I whispered. His eyes met mine, sharp, unreadable, edged in restraint. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared like he was trying to decide what I was made of. "I'm not here to coddle you, Isidora." "Good. I've had enough softness used like rope." Something flickered across his face almost too fast to see. Then he released me. I sat up, sweat clinging to my skin, chest rising and falling like I'd outrun something larger than myself. He paced to the side, fingers dragging through his hair. Silence pooled between us, thick and humming, until I broke it. "Why are you really doing this?" He didn't turn around. "You don't know me. You don't owe me." "No," he said. "But I recognize a woman on the edge of something dangerous. And I don't believe in letting people drown when they've already tasted air." My throat tightened. The words hit deeper than I wanted them to. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, heart louder than reason. "I don't know who I am without him." His gaze cut to mine, sharp enough to carve. "Then it's time you find out." I walked toward him, step by step, something pulling me forward that had nothing to do with survival. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Not even when I stopped so close I could taste his breath. My voice was barely sound when I asked, "And who are you, Dante?" He leaned in, not touching me, but close enough to burn. "The last man who will ever hurt you." His words were promise and threat, a line drawn in smoke. I could have kissed him. I think I almost did, but something in his eyes warned me. Not yet. He wasn't ready to be touched by anything soft. And I wasn't ready to offer softness. Not again. So instead, I said the truth. "I want to make him bleed." And Dante smiled. Not fully, not sweetly, but with something ancient and brutal and satisfied. "Then you'll need more than fists," he said. I nodded. "Teach me everything." And this time, when he walked away, I followed.
She followed me without hesitation, barefoot and bruised, as if her pain belonged to me. And maybe it did. Maybe every cut she'd hidden, every breath she'd silenced under someone else's control, had found its echo in my steps. I heard her behind me, quiet but present, like the hum of something that refuses to die. The armory door opened with a soft hiss of steel and shadow. Inside, the walls were lined with violence. Knives, pistols, ropes, relics from lives I no longer lived but never left behind. She stood in the center, eyes catching the glint of metal like a child staring into the mouth of a storm. "You're not here to learn how to kill," I said. "No," she answered. "I'm here to learn how not to be killed." I turned slowly, measured her posture, the line of her spine, the way she didn't flinch at the cold. Fear doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. She met my eyes, then reshaped me. It was the kind of line that shouldn't have affected me, but it did, because there was no poetry in her tone, just need, just fury dressed as hunger. I stepped closer, picked up a blade from the wall, short, curved, perfect for the palm of someone learning not to hesitate. I held it out. She didn't look at she looked at me. If I take it, I become her. Who? The version of me that survives. I didn't answer. There was no answer, only action. I placed the knife gently into her hand. Her fingers curled around it like memory, like instinct. "Again," I said softly, "don't aim to win. Aim to outlast." Her breath hitched. "I've already done that." I watched her move, slow at first, cautious, then bolder, slashing the air like it had once held her down. Her hair clung to her skin, sweat beading along the edges of her collarbone. She was fury wrapped in elegance, a storm taught to whisper. I walked behind her, close enough to feel the heat of her frustration, the tremble beneath her control. I placed my hands over her arms, guided the movement. Not a touch meant to claim, but to mold. Here, I whispered into her neck. Your wrist is too tight. Let it flow. Like breath, like blood. She didn't move away. You don't touch like other men. I held her steady. And you don't look at me like other women. That made her pause. Why? She asked. Because I don't want what you're not ready to give. Her pulse jumped. I felt it, heard it, wanted to silence it with my mouth, with something raw and unspoken, but I didn't. I stepped back, again. She moved sharper this time, cleaner. I watched the rhythm in her body shift from survival to something closer to power. It stirred something deep inside me, something darker than desire, respect, awe, a dangerous ache. When she stopped, chest rising like a tide, she turned to me and said, "He never let me fight back." I didn't blink. Then fight me. What? Right now. Come at me like you would him. She hesitated, just long enough to remember. Then she struck. It wasn't clean. It wasn't beautiful. It was wild, messy, furious. She screamed as she swung, not with her voice, but her soul. I blocked each movement with calculated restraint, never hurting her, never letting her land fully, but letting her feel the resistance, the edge of what she could become. When she finally collapsed to her knees, breath shattered, hair stuck to her skin, she looked up at me with eyes no longer afraid. I crouched before her, slow. "I don't need to protect you," I said. "I need to remind you. And what am I?" I brushed a knuckle along her jaw, just once. A weapon learning to want. She didn't look away, and I didn't breathe.
My body was trembling, but not from exhaustion. Something deeper had awakened beneath my skin, something dark and sweet and terrifying. I should have felt broken. I should have cried. Instead, I stared at him, Dante, this man carved from silence and shadow, and I wanted to consume the stillness in his eyes, to taste the control he wore like a second soul. He'd called me a weapon. No one had ever looked at me and seen anything other than a girl to ruin or repair. But he didn't try to fix me. He handed me the blade. I rose slowly, the air between us thick enough to drown in. His knuckle had barely touched my jaw, and yet it burned hotter than any bruise I'd ever worn. I didn't flinch, not from him, not anymore. I walked past him toward the far wall, where the knives gleamed like promises. My reflection shimmered in the polished steel, barefoot, blood-stained, unrecognizable. That girl who once whispered apologies into silence was gone, buried beneath bruises, beneath sweat and rage, and something he hadn't named yet. I turned back to him. "You said I'm learning to want. What if I already do?" His eyes darkened, but he didn't move. "Then you'll need to learn how to survive that too." There was no softness in his voice, only restraint, tightly coiled, deadly. I stepped closer, not to tempt him, not to seduce, just to see if I could. His breath hitched, almost nothing, but I heard it. "Why won't you touch me?" I asked, voice low, steady. "Because you're not ready for what I'd do if I did." My heart clenched, not from fear, but from recognition. I'd spent years being touched by hands that never asked, never hesitated. And here was this man, this myth, who held his hunger behind his teeth like a secret made of knives. And if I wanted anyway? He took one step forward, so close I felt his heat crawl across my skin. His gaze pinned me in place, voice softer now, dangerous. "Wanting isn't needing, Isidora. Don't confuse the fire with the burn." "I'm not confused." My voice cracked, but I didn't look away. "I just don't know what to do when it doesn't hurt." He stared at me like he could tear through every layer of me with nothing but breath. Then slowly, he reached up, so slow it was a warning, and tucked a strand of damp hair behind my ear. "It still hurts," he murmured, "just differently." My eyes closed, not because I was afraid, but because I felt too much. Too fast. The quiet tension between us had teeth. It pressed against my skin, begging to sink in. "I hate him," I whispered. "I know. I want to watch him fall apart the way he made me." "You will. I want him to beg. He won't get the chance." I opened my eyes. "Will you help me?" His reply was a whisper against my skin. "I already am." We stood there, breathing each other in, not touching but somehow closer than skin. The hum of violence had faded into something else, something sharper. Not love, not yet, just the ache that lives in the space before it. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. He was my ruin, and I was starting to like it.
She didn't move when I touched her, didn't tremble, didn't pull away. That should have made it easier to retreat, but it didn't. Her stillness wasn't surrender, it was something else. like standing on the edge of a blade and daring it to bleed. I could smell the shift in the way violence no longer clung to her like a scent, but pulsed inside her like blood. She was becoming, and she didn't even know it yet. The air between us snapped like a stretched wire. Her breath ghosted across my throat, too close, too sweet, too real. I should have turned away. I didn't. I should walk, I said. Then walk, she whispered. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because she wasn't begging, and I wasn't denying. We were circling something larger than both of us. Something that burned without touching and tasted like ruin before it even began. She had no idea how many men had fallen for less than what she was offering. Silence. Strength. Need without apology. You don't understand what this is. Maybe I do. Maybe that's why I'm still here. There it was. The answer I hadn't wanted but needed. She wasn't lost. She was choosing. Me. This. The ache under her skin that matched mine. But I couldn't give her what she thought she needed. Because what lived inside me wasn't safety. It was rot dressed in control. And I knew how this story ended. Always. You're not ready, I said, stepping back. Her expression didn't crack, but something behind her eyes flickered. No, you're not. She turned from me then, graceful, defiant, almost cruel in her calm, and walked to the edge of the room. Not to retreat, but to reclaim space. I watched her kneel at the mat, stretching in silence, that tight little black tank clinging to every inch of her. She didn't glance at me again. She didn't need to. I stood there, pulse slow but violent, like restraint had claws now. I had taught her to strike, to breathe through pain, to own the silence instead of surviving it. But I hadn't taught her what to do when the man standing in front of her was already at war with himself. She rolled her neck, letting out a soft sigh, and it sounded too much like surrender. Not to me, to the power burning in her blood now. I knew that sound. It haunted me. I crossed the room without thinking, crouched behind her, close but not touching. My voice low, measured, dangerous. Want another lesson? She nodded once. Teach me something useful. Fine. Close your eyes. She obeyed. I circled her like prey and predator both, speaking just above a whisper. If he grabs your wrist, what do you do? Break his fingers. If he chokes you, dig into his eyes. Or bite. And if he touches you where you don't want him to. She opened her eyes slowly, turned to look at me, and her voice was steady. I kill him. I smiled then, just a little, because she meant it. Good, I said. But sometimes power is in not needing to show it. She tilted her head. That sounds like something a man says when he doesn't want to see what a woman can do. I leaned in, voice colder now, sharper. No, that's something a man says when he's seen it already, and survived. She blinked. Barely, I added. Her laugh, low, unexpected, tugged at something in my chest I didn't have a name for. And that's when I knew. She was going to be the one thing I couldn't control, and I was going to let her.
The first drop of rain hit the glass just as I closed the door behind me. I didn't know why I needed air. Maybe because he'd taken all of mine, left none behind. The corridor was quiet, dim, lined with shadows that felt more honest than most light. My feet moved on instinct, not memory. I wasn't escaping. I just couldn't breathe with his voice still whispering behind my ribs. Every inch of me was vibrating. His breath had touched my skin without touching it. His words had lodged between my thighs, soft and brutal, and I hated that I could still feel the shape of them days later. I didn't want this. Not again. Not like this. But I couldn't stop remembering the way his eyes pinned me when I said I'd kill for myself. I'd meant it. God help me, I had. I stepped into the guest room he'd given me, my sanctuary, my cell. I still couldn't tell the difference. The walls breathed around me, soft and slow, and I sat on the edge of the bed like the ground might vanish if I moved too quickly. My hands trembled. I stared at them. They'd held a knife earlier. They'd curled into fists. They'd bruised him. Just once. Just a little. Just enough to know I could. But none of that made me feel strong. I felt ruined. And somehow, I wanted him to see me like that. I stood, stripped off the tank top, the sweat-slick pants, let the fabric fall to the floor like skin I no longer wanted. I walked to the mirror, bare, unhidden. My body told the story of a woman no one had protected. Faint scars, bruises fading, a mouth that no longer apologized for itself. I stared, and for once, didn't look away. When the knock came, I didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. I didn't cover myself. He stopped in the doorway, eyes dark, jaw clenched, like my nakedness was a weapon and he didn't know how to disarm it. You left your knife in the gym, he said, voice low, uneven. I didn't move. Then leave it. He didn't. The silence between us wasn't silence anymore. It was heat. It was breath. It was the slow unraveling of restraint, thread by thread. His gaze traveled over me like he didn't want to want me. like he resented the gravity pulling us closer. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "Then tell me to go." I couldn't. He stepped inside, slowly, every movement a question, every pause a warning. He placed the knife on the dresser, but his hand didn't leave it. Not right away. His knuckles were white. His chest rose like a man trying not to drown. "Say it," he murmured. I swallowed. "What? That you want me." I closed my eyes, because it was the only way not to fall apart. "I don't want you." He didn't move. "I need you." His breath hitched, and I hated him for hearing the truth in it. He crossed the distance between us with terrifying quiet. His hand rose, hovered near my throat, but didn't touch. Not yet. He was waiting for something. Permission. Permission to lose everything he'd been trying to control. I opened my eyes and nodded. He exhaled once, and finally, he kissed me.
Her mouth opened beneath mine like a confession. No hesitance, no fear, just raw, deliberate surrender. But it wasn't innocent. Nothing about her ever was. She kissed like she was claiming something buried under scars and silence, and the ache neither of us dared to name. I felt her fingers curl into my shirt, dragging me closer, deeper, until the line between control and collapse blurred into heat and skin and breath. I should have stopped it. I didn't, because I'd tasted her name on the edge of restraint for too long, and now that she was in my arms, trembling and defiant, I couldn't pretend she wasn't already mine. Her body pressed against me like truth, warm, desperate, alive, the kind of contact that rewrites memory. I kissed her harder, slower, like I could force time to fracture around this moment, keep it for myself. She gasped into my mouth when I bit her bottom lip, not cruel, just enough to remind her what I was, not soft, not safe, but hers. She pulled back only slightly, breath hitching against my jaw. "You said I wasn't ready." I exhaled through my nose, dragging my mouth to her neck. "You weren't. And now?" My hands slid over the curve of her hips, fingers digging just enough to anchor her. "Now you're dangerous." I felt her smile before I saw it, a slow, devastating. Her nails traced down my spine, every inch a challenge. "So are you." I stepped back, not because I wanted space, but because I needed clarity. She stood before me naked in every way, flesh, fear, intention. The kind of woman who rises from her own ashes and then dares the fire to burn her. "You don't know what this means," I said. "I do," she whispered. "It means I'm done being afraid." I dragged a hand through my hair, jaw tight. Every instinct in me screamed to pull her back, to devour the rest of her breath until she forgot every man who ever touched her without care. But I wasn't built for comfort. I was built for vengeance. And she was becoming something close to salvation. That made her lethal. "Isidora!" She stepped toward me, no hesitation. "Don't speak to me like I'm fragile." "You're not," I said, voice hardening. "You're fire, but fire still consumes. And maybe I want to be consumed." Her words were a weapon, sharp, irresistible. I moved to her again, slower this time. My fingers grazed her jaw, then tilted her chin until our eyes locked. "Then understand this," I said, every word razor smooth. "This isn't love. What you feel, what I let you feel, it's survival dressed in heat. It's danger tangled in desire. You don't get to fall for me." Her breath trembled, but her gaze never wavered. Too late. I stared at her for one long, merciless moment, then leaned in close enough for her skin to hum. My lips brushed her cheek, just once. "Then don't say I didn't warn you." And I left her standing there, bare, burning, and completely forgettable.
He left me standing there, skin still warm from his breath, heart bruised by the sound of his retreating footsteps. I didn't move, didn't speak. The room held his absence like a wound, quiet, pulsing, unfinished, and I hated how much of me wanted to chase after him, pull him back, demand something he'd never offer. Love, safety, a name for this ache that didn't sound like surrender. But I didn't move, because part of me understood. He didn't kiss me to claim me. He kissed me to remind me that desire is not the same thing as belonging, that even when his hands were on my skin, I was still alone. And yet, he didn't take. He gave me a choice. He always gave me a choice. I wrapped the sheet around my body, slowly, grounding myself in the fabric like armor. My reflection in the mirror didn't tremble. My shoulders stayed square. My mouth didn't beg. I'd already begged enough in other lives, for mercy, for silence, for someone to believe me. Now I only wanted one thing, revenge, but not the messy, frantic kind, not screams or bullets in the dark. No, I wanted him to feel it. Henrique. I wanted him to look into my eyes when I stripped everything from him. Power, pride, fear. I wanted him to see the woman he tried to destroy and realize she was the one holding the match. Dante had shown me how to fight. But this would be my own choreography. I left the room, barefoot, the hall cold under my skin, but strangely welcome. A storm had begun outside. The sky cracked with thunder, and I felt it inside my chest like a second heartbeat. Everything was coming, fast. I could feel it in the way the house seemed too still, like it was watching. Downstairs, I found Luca in the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He didn't flinch when he saw me in nothing but a sheet. Didn't leer, didn't ask questions. "You're up early," he said. I met his gaze. "I need a car." He arched a brow. "Does Dante know?" "I'm not asking." His silence was his answer. 10 minutes later, I was dressed in black. Tight jeans, leather jacket, hair pulled back. My reflection looked like someone new, someone who didn't wait for permission. The gun Dante had given me weeks ago rested against my hip. Cold, familiar, mine. As I opened the front door, the storm breathed against my face. Rain, thick and violent, kissed my skin like a warning. I stepped into it anyway, because pain didn't scare me anymore, and neither did he. Henrique would see me one last time, but it wouldn't be the girl he married. It would be the woman he never saw coming.
The moment I walked into the gym and found it empty, I knew. The silence wasn't natural, it was surgical, left behind with intent. No echo of her breath, no scent of her sweat in the air, just the absence. And the storm pressing against the windows like it was trying to speak in a language only I understood. I didn't panic, I didn't curse. I just stood there, staring at the mat where she'd bled and burned and rebuilt herself. And I knew exactly where she'd gone. To him, I should have stopped her, should have locked every door, broken her resolve before it hardened into vengeance. But I didn't, because I wanted this too. I wanted him to see her. I wanted Henrique to look into the face of the woman he tried to possess and realize he'd created the architect of his own ruin. But I also knew what men like him did when cornered. Cowards only become monsters when they feel the leash slipping. And she, my fire-drenched, fearless storm, was walking into a den that used to be her prison, alone. I called Luca. My voice was cold steel wrapped in velvet. "How long ago?" 20 minutes. "She's driving herself?" "Yes." "Track her. Stay back. I'll handle it." I hung up before he could ask if I was sure. I wasn't. Not about anything except this. If he touched her, if that bastard so much as breathed in her direction, I would make him beg for mercy in a language his soul couldn't speak. The rain thickened as I moved, suit soaked through by the time I reached the car, but I didn't feel it. I was inside out already. My hands gripped the wheel like they could crush the road itself. Every mile between us was a thread I pulled tighter around my throat. I could feel her rage pulsing through the city like a beacon, a fire with no fear of spreading. She didn't need me to save her, but God help anyone who tried to stop me from watching her burn everything down. I didn't know what I'd say when I saw her. I wasn't good at apology, even worse at promises. But I had given her one truth, that I don't save. I only show the way. And still, part of me prayed I wouldn't be too late. Not because I feared she'd fail, but because I wasn't sure I could survive watching her become the kind of woman who doesn't look back. Not even for me.
The rain hit the windshield like war drums, relentless and hungry. Each drop a pulse, a warning, a countdown. I didn't flinch. I didn't slow. The road stretched ahead like a vein, slick and black, and I followed it straight to the house I once called home, the house that bled me quiet, that whispered obedience into every wall, that taught me how to survive instead of live. I parked outside and killed the engine. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the space before a scream. His car was there. Of course it was. Henrique never left. He rooted himself in control like a sickness that refuses to die. I stepped out slowly, letting the rain soak into me like baptism, or maybe poison. My boots hit the pavement with purpose. No hesitation, no second thoughts, only the weapon I had become. I didn't knock. I used the key. It slid into the lock like muscle memory. The door opened on a creak I'd once feared, but now it only made my pulse steady, familiar, predictable. I stepped inside, soaked to the skin, eyes already adjusting to the dim. The hallway was just as I'd left it. The chandelier above, too bright. The scent of cologne and power clinging to the air like rot. And then, his voice. Isidora? That name used to make me freeze. Now it made me smile. He stepped out from his study, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, pretending at comfort. But I saw the tension in his stance the second he registered me. I stood dripping in his doorway, a storm made flesh. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked. I didn't answer. I walked. He backed up instinctively. That was the first thrill. "Where have you been?" His voice sharpened. "You think you can run off and come back like nothing happened?" I took off my jacket, dropped it to the floor. His eyes flicked to the gun at my hip. Good. Say something, he barked, the mask cracking. I tilted my head. You ever wonder what it feels like to be afraid, Henrique? He laughed, but it was hollow, cracked. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. He moved fast. I moved faster. He reached for my arm like old times, entitlement disguised as ownership, but I twisted, stepped inside, drove my elbow into his ribs. He staggered, gasped. You hit me? His voice was disbelief wrapped in panic. I hit him again, this time across the face. Open palm, no finesse, just fury. He lunged. I kicked. He fell. I followed. My knee pinned his chest, one hand at his throat, the other wrapped around the hilt of the blade Dante had given me. I didn't press it to skin. I didn't need to. The look in his eyes gave me everything I came for. Terror. Real. Raw. Mine. You broke me, I whispered. But you didn't finish the job. That was your mistake. He tried to speak. I didn't let him. I stood, calm, collected, the storm raging behind me through the open door. He stayed on the floor, gasping like a man who just learned what it means to lose. I looked down at him one last time. I'm not yours anymore. And I left.
By the time I reached the house, the storm had softened to a whisper, the kind of rain that no longer threatened but mourned. I parked down the street, engine off, windows fogged with the weight of what I might find. I didn't move, not yet. I needed to feel it first. The echo of her, the scent of her rage hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. She had already been here. I could feel it in my bones, in the way the shadows around the house held their breath, waiting. I stepped out, walked slow. The front door was cracked open, swaying just enough to whisper something final. I pushed it gently, and it opened with the same sound every door makes when it's no longer meant to keep anyone out. Inside, the silence was unnatural, not peaceful, hollow. I saw the trail she'd left, the soaked footprints, the discarded jacket, the subtle smear of something red on the floor that wasn't hers. It wasn't blood. Not quite. Just proof. The kind that only mattered to men like me. Men who understood the violence it took to walk out whole. I found him where I knew he'd be. On the floor. Disheveled. Face marked. Shirt wrinkled. He looked like a man who had seen his god and realized she had teeth. He looked up. You. His voice shook under the weight of its own shame. She brought you? I didn't answer. You think she's yours now? He spat. You think she won't turn on you too? I walked closer. Step by step. No rush. I wanted him to feel the weight of every inch I crossed, to feel time bleed. She didn't need me, I said. She came to end something, and she did. He laughed, bitter and bloodstained. She's a liar, a little broken thing pretending to be dangerous. I knelt slowly, face level with his, and let my silence dig in deeper than words ever could. She's not pretending, I said, low and cold. She just stopped pretending to be yours. His jaw clenched. I could smell the fear rising through him now, sour and pathetic. I leaned in, just enough for him to feel my breath. You should be grateful it was her hands and not mine. I should kill you, he hissed. You tried that once, through her. My eyes locked with his. Didn't work out, did it? He reached for something. I let him, just to see the last flicker of his pride before I crushed it. My hand was around his throat and tight, controlled, just enough to remind him how easily I could end it. I whispered into the shell of his ear, voice coated in ice. You're going to stay down. You're going to disappear, or I will finish what she started. His body went still, and I let go. He fell back, gasping like a man reborn in humiliation. I stood, adjusted my cuffs, and turned toward the open door. She was standing outside. Rain slicked across her shoulders, her hair, her mouth. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just looked at me like she knew I'd come. Like maybe, for once, she hadn't been entirely alone in the storm. And I walked to her, slowly, carefully, but not to save her, to stand beside her. Because the fire was hers, and I was done pretending I didn't want to burn.
He stepped toward me, slow like the night itself had thickened around his feet, and I didn't move. The rain curled down my spine, soaked through the cotton of my shirt, but I barely felt it. I only felt him. The way his eyes stayed on mine, like he was trying to memorize something he couldn't name. He didn't ask what I'd done. He didn't need to. I could see the answer in the way his jaw tightened, the way his breath came heavier than usual. He knew. He'd known I would do it before I did. But he came anyway. I hated him for that, and I loved him for it. I didn't need you, I said, voice steady, sharp. I know. I would have done it without you watching. I know. My fingers twitched at my sides, nerves still vibrating from the violence I'd poured into Henrique's skin. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't regret either. It was something deeper, quieter, a knowing. Like I had finally touched the edge of myself, and I wasn't afraid of what lived there anymore. You're bleeding, he said. I looked down. My knuckles were raw, split open at the bone. The pain hadn't registered until now. I'd struck harder than I meant to. Good. I didn't notice. He reached out, carefully, as if I were something breakable again, but not weak. Never that. His fingers brushed my hand. He took it, turned it in his, examined the damage like it belonged to him. There was nothing tender in his touch, only reverence, as if what I'd done wasn't monstrous, but sacred. You hit him. Yes. Hard. I smiled. Twice. He held my gaze. Should have been more. The air between us thickened. Again. Always. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. I let him hold my hand like a relic, like a warning, like something he wanted to worship but didn't trust himself to keep. He was nothing, I said softly. And yet, you carried his weight for years. Not anymore. Dante stepped closer. Rain slid down his face, disappeared into the collar of his coat. His voice dropped. You look like a goddamn war. I tilted my chin. Good. He leaned in, just enough to make my breath catch. You've always been one. For a second, the silence held its breath. Then I whispered, Do you want me? His mouth parted, but no sound came. His hand still cradled mine, blood dripping down our wrists like a promise neither of us knew how to make. I want 100 things I'll never have, he said. But yes, I want you. The words sliced something open inside me. Not soft, not sweet, but real. Then take me. He looked at me like I was a fire he'd known would consume him the moment he got too close, and stepped forward anyway. But instead of kissing me, instead of pulling me into him like I needed, he brought my hand to his mouth and kissed the wound instead. A slow, deliberate promise. Then he let go, and stepped back. I don't want to take what you've only just reclaimed. His restraint burned more than any touch. And still, I understood, so I didn't beg. I just said, Then don't disappear. His eyes flicked to mine. Not unless you tell me to. And for the first time, I believed it.
I should have stayed. God knows I wanted to. Her blood was still on my hands, warm and real and alive. She looked at me like I was something more than flesh and ruin, like I was a man who could be wanted without being needed. And that, God, that nearly undid me. But I didn't stay, because I knew what came next. And it wasn't softness. It wasn't safety. It was a line I couldn't uncross, and she deserved to choose who she crossed it with, not collapse into me because I'd been the only one who didn't break her. I watched her disappear into the doorway of my car, watched the door close, the glass fog with the heat she left behind, and I stood there in the rain, heart pulsing too loud against the silence of the street. I didn't move until she was gone. Inside, I cleaned the blood from my hands like it was ritual. I watched the water swirl red at the drain and wondered what part of me she took with her. Not because she stole it, because I gave it without asking. She never begged. She never had to. Luca found me an hour later in the study. He didn't speak right away. He knew better. She's safe? I asked without looking. She's asleep. Didn't ask for anyone. Didn't ask for you. That stung more than I let him see. She finished it, I said. She did. And she walked away. She did. The silence stretched. Luca cleared his throat. She'll leave, Dante. I nodded. You going to stop her? I looked up. Would you? He hesitated. I'd burn the world for a woman like that. I gave a humorless smile. That's why you shouldn't. He left me alone after that. I sat in the dark, glass of whiskey in my hand, her name on my tongue like a bruise I kept pressing. I knew she'd be gone by morning. No tearful goodbye, no promises. Just the soft sound of her boots on marble and the echo of everything we didn't say. She wasn't mine. She never was. And still, she was the only thing I'd ever wanted to. But I wouldn't chase her, because love isn't a leash. And I'd already broken too many beautiful things.
I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. He would know. The silence I left behind said everything I wasn't brave enough to speak. It said thank you. It said don't follow me. It said if you love me, let me go before I start needing you more than myself. The morning was gray, but clean, like the world had finally exhaled. I walked through his house barefoot, the floor cool beneath my feet, the air still thick with everything we almost were. I paused at the door to his study. His scent still lingered there. Whiskey, leather, rain, regret. I closed my eyes for 1 second too long, then forced myself forward. I wasn't breaking. I was just remembering what it felt like to be wanted without being owned. Outside, the sky stretched wide and pale, promising nothing. I stepped into the quiet, into the unknown, with no plan and no destination, only freedom. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like breath, like the first one after drowning. I thought leaving him would hurt more, but it wasn't pain. It was hunger, the kind that builds slowly, behind the ribs, deep in the marrow. I would carry him with me. The way he looked at me like I was fire he didn't fear. The way he never touched without purpose. The way he gave me my own name back without asking for anything in return. But he wasn't mine, and I couldn't stay. Not when the world was waiting. Not when I was finally ready to meet it without shaking. I didn't cry until I was in the car. Not because I was sad. Not because I doubted. But because the part of me that once believed I couldn't survive without him had finally died. And letting her go deserved something soft, something final. I didn't turn on the radio. I drove in silence, hands steady, mouth set, eyes open wide. The road ahead didn't promise safety, but it was mine. And this time, I wasn't running. I was choosing.
I knew she was gone before I opened my eyes. The house was too still, not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that follows after something is taken, not left. I didn't rush, didn't call her name. That wasn't our language. She didn't owe me words. Only ghosts remain in places like this. And I'd never been afraid of being haunted. Her scent lingered faintly in the hallway. Salt and rain and something warm I didn't have a name for. I followed it without meaning to. My hand brushed the doorframe where she used to lean when she didn't want to leave but couldn't make herself stay. I stared at the space she used to fill, and for a moment I hated the air for letting her slip through. She hadn't asked me to stop her. She'd trusted that I wouldn't, and that was love in a language too sharp for me to hold without bleeding. I made coffee like it mattered, black and slow, the way she'd started drinking it after every morning we didn't talk about. She'd sit in silence, legs folded beneath her, watching the world through the window like it might offer her an answer if she stayed still long enough. I never interrupted her then. I wouldn't now. Luca entered but didn't speak. He just stood there, watching me stir a cup for someone who wouldn't drink it. His silence was heavier than the storm outside. "She's gone," he finally said. "I know. She didn't leave a message. She didn't need to. You're letting her walk?" I looked up. My voice didn't waver. "She wasn't mine to..." He nodded once and left, like a man who knew better than to challenge something sacred. I sat in her silence for hours, thought about the way her breath hitched when I kissed her wound instead of her mouth, the way she never looked away when I told her the truth she didn't want, the way she bled her past out onto my floor and never once asked me to clean it up. She came into my world like a fault line, quiet, shattering, and I let her leave, not because I didn't want her, but because wanting her was never the problem. It was needing her that terrified me. And now, I would learn to live with the echo of her footsteps fading down a hallway that no longer led back to me.
3 years is enough time to become someone else. Or at least to stop being the girl who ran barefoot through marble halls, heart pounding with someone else's rage. I don't wake up gasping anymore. I don't shrink from mirrors. My silence is no longer submission. It's sovereignty, the kind earned, scar by scar, breath by breath. The city moves differently now. I walk through it without looking over my shoulder, without calculating exits. People call me by name, but not with pity. They say it with respect, sometimes fear. Good. Fear keeps a certain kind of man from trying again. I built something from the ashes, a studio. Women come to me now, not the broken ones, no, the ones who already know they've survived, but want to learn how to fight like it. I train them how he trained me, only I look them in the eyes when they bleed. I hold space for their fury. I don't tell them to calm down. I tell them to aim higher. Sometimes, I still hear him in the back of my mind. Dante. His voice like gravel under silk. That low, deliberate way he used to speak when he wanted to hide how much he cared. He thought I didn't see it, but I did. I saw all of him, even the parts he kept locked away behind that impossible stillness. I haven't seen him since I walked out. Haven't tried to find him. He made it clear. His world wasn't meant for softness, and I was never soft. I just hadn't realized it yet. But today, something changed. I walked into a restaurant, not planned, just instinct. The place was upscale, private, the kind of place men like him always preferred. I told myself it wasn't about him, that I was here for the food, for the quiet, for the power of walking into places I used to fear. Then I saw him. He didn't turn right away. He was seated in the back, alone, like always. Glass in hand, dark suit tailored to punishment, not comfort. The years hadn't softened him. If anything, they'd carved him deeper. He looked like danger in its final form, collected, composed, lethal, and he was watching me in the reflection of his glass. Of course he knew I was there. I walked toward him, not slowly, not like before. My steps were confident, grounded. Each one whispered, "I don't need you, I never did, but I want to see if you still bleed the way I remember." He didn't stand, just watched, measured, waited. I reached his table, slid into the seat across from him, and held his gaze like it owed me something. My voice didn't shake. "Now I choose." He said nothing. "I choose you," I said. Still nothing. Not because I'm lost. Not because I need saving. but because I finally understand what it means to want and not wither. A long pause stretched between us. He set his glass down, slow, then leaned in. His voice was soft, dangerous. "And what will you do if I say yes?" I smiled. "Burn everything down again, but this time, together."
She walked into the room like she belonged to it, not like she used to, hesitant, braced for impact, but like the storm had taught her how to own silence. I felt her before I saw her, that shift in the air, that breath I forgot to take, and when I turned, she was already halfway to me, heels clicking like a countdown, mouth set like a promise. My grip tightened around the glass. 3 years. And somehow, she looked more dangerous in peace than she ever did in pain. She sat without asking. Of course she did. The Isidora in front of me didn't wait for permission. She was fire-tempered in steel, all sharp edges and elegant poise. But her eyes, they still held that same burn, that same question I'd spent years trying not to answer. Now I didn't want to look away. Her voice cut the distance between us like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Now I choose." I didn't flinch. "I choose you." The words didn't fall. They landed, heavy, absolute, and I hated how much they hurt. Not because they weren't true, because I didn't know if I deserved to hear them. She leaned in, slow, no fear, no hesitation. "Not because I need saving, because I know what I am, and I still want you." My throat tightened. I hadn't spoken a word. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because this was the version of her I never thought I'd see again. Not broken, not rebuilding, whole, on fire, unstoppable, and somehow, still mine. Her smile was wicked, devastating. "So, Dante, what will you do if I say I want everything?" I set the glass down, slowly, deliberately, then met her gaze like a man stepping off a ledge with his eyes wide open. My voice came low, rough, certain. "I burn with you," she exhaled, soft, release. And just like that, the world narrowed to her, because love was never my language. But loyalty? Loyalty was sacred, and I'd follow her into no questions asked. "Thank you for reaching the end." If these words touched you, even if only for a breath, know that your presence here means more than silence can ever say. This story was built from fire, from ache, from the quiet hope that someone like you would listen. Every like you leave, every comment, no matter how small, breathes life into this space. When you share what moved you, you help this story reach others who might need it. And that is everything. If you feel something right now, let it show. Click like, leave a whisper in the comments. Even just an "I'm here" makes the darkness softer. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. It's free, and it brings you back every time a new story is born. And if your heart allows, share. With someone who's hurting, with someone who's healing, with someone who's forgotten what it feels like to be seen. In a world full of noise and scars, maybe this can be a quiet rebellion, a story passed from soul to soul. Thank you for being here, and may you always, always feel welcome in this corner of flame and tenderness.